starting in San Francisco, the most incredible sensation, visceral sensation of being 5,000 miles away or long further, I think. No phones, nobody knew where I was, nobody knew me there except this brief meeting with her, and how liberating that felt.
When you go back to that moment today of liberation almost, how does it make you feel?
Excited that I know it's possible to have it again. Sad that it hasn't happened more often in my life. In that I felt wholly and truly alive in that moment. And I mean, it was kind of fairy tale magical in a way, because I literally arrived there. I had $200 in my pocket. This woman didn't know really anything about me other than I had that business. She assumed that I was turning up with somewhere to live, and she just didn't question it. She also thought I was about 10 years older than I was. So I turned up with nothing, and I remember looking in the paper and found a room which was on Alamo Square, which had the view of the famous kind of postcard where you've got the skyscrapers in the background and the Victorian houses in front. And I was just completely blown away that this was possible. It was literally like a rush of something I'd never felt before. And it was the kind of thing that people often describe as drugs. It was like a complete high, but it was just this extraordinary feeling of liberation and freedom. Yeah, that's all I can say. And that I had no idea what was going to happen. I think up to that point, everything felt like it had some promise in front, whereas this was, I had no idea.
Well, it also makes me think of the fact that these opportunities arise and you either seize them or you don't, right? Or you either go with it. And probably back then, if you talk to your parents, they would have said, well, you've got, you can't leave your business. But probably in your mind, at some epidermic level, you thought you'd nothing to lose, right? It's kind of, as I say, like, what's the worst that can happen? Do you think that we, as people, though, really, block ourselves because we aren't open to the opportunities? You have to be open to it, right?
I'm a firm believer that we are given opportunities throughout our life, because my understanding is that the nature of life is that it's benevolent, that it offers new beginnings all the time. And going back to what I do as an acupuncturist, I'm working with the reality of the seasons and what the seasons teach us. And the seasons teach us is about change and about new opportunities.
In the past, you've referred to, what you considered perhaps at the time was quite a rigid mindset because you were really in your business lane on that highway. Talk me through the transition from that through to starting on a new path in acupuncture.
Well, I arrived in San Francisco and had a feeling of liberation, but I also arrived with myself and my programming. So I very quickly took what I was used to and kind of imposed it into the new California life. And the striking difference was my work ethic versus the people that I was then working with. They were a much more laid back crowd. Most of the people I met of my age had never worked before. They'd been to, come out of school, gone into college, had never had a part-time job growing up. And I'd been working pretty much since I was 16, and I'd always had part-time jobs. So it was just normal for me. I had this kind of English working class / middle class work ethic. So for me, initially, I just put into place what I already knew, but it was sunnier. So I kind of
big advantage.
I didn't turn straight into a hippie or this kind of liberated being. And this was the 80s in San Francisco. It was the tail end of the hippie phase. The transition was having acupuncture. I mean, that was the thing, is I was getting very upset with the people that were working for me at that point. I started employing people because they wouldn't come to work on time. They would leave when they felt like it. They were kind of on their phones to their friends, wandering. I just wasn't used to that. For me, I was absolutely used to a very, very rigid work structure. And it was going to acupuncture, which I didn't believe in at all. I mean, the only reason I went really was because this guy that was recommended to me, Emmett, He was literally round the corner, and I thought, well, that's good. I can pop in there at lunchtime. So I was kind of curious, but I wasn't taking it that seriously. And I was going because several people I knew had been and said he was great. And I didn't like the interaction. He was asking me questions about me and my life. I'd never done anything like that before, and I didn't believe in it. And the striking thing was for me was because I went as a non-believer. The next morning, waking up and feeling different in a way that I can't really explain. I mean, it was similar to the feeling that I had when I arrived there. So that's how I kind of knew it was in the same kind of camp of a new experience and a very welcome experience.
So in the coming days, you're back in work, you're doing your thing, you're back to what you know. Did you see all of that through a new prism because of this experience you had, or how did it manifest itself?
The thing that tipped it was the woman that had originally invited me to go out there. I said casually in a conversation to her after the treatment, I think it's time for me to start traveling again. And I said, I'm curious about going to China. I mean, it was bizarre. I didn't even link it with acupuncture or anything. And she immediately said to me, look, I'll tell you what, I'm going to make you a partner in one of my other businesses. She basically didn't want to lose me. So she kind of tempted me with money. And I remember then speaking to my mother and saying, I've got this dilemma. I really feel like I want to travel. I'm only, I was 24 at the time. And my mother, of course, as mothers do, said, oh, no, you should take that opportunity and stay there and keep working. And the next morning I woke up and my gum was pouring with blood. And I went to the dentist. He says, nothing wrong with you. Went to the doctor, nothing wrong with you. And it kept happening until I finally said, no, I am going to leave. And literally, the bleeding gums stopped right away. So I was starting to realize the kind of link of stress and the physical body. And then instead of going to China, I suddenly came up with this idea that I wanted to become a therapist, a psychotherapist. And that was really because people always used to come to me with their problems. And I think with this new insight, it was just all the stars aligned. And suddenly I thought, I want to do that. During that time, that is where I discovered a different place within myself, which I recognize is a different place where we can all meet as human beings. So it all sounds a bit mad and woo-woo, but it's an actual feeling. It's an experience. And it goes back again to that feeling I had when I arrived in San Francisco, that feeling of freedom. The freedom to not be me and the name I've been given and the gender I have and sexuality I have and where all of those labels that we're desperate to have and then trap us.
Was that like an epiphany for you?
No, it was when I first had it. It was an epiphany, but very difficult to get back to again. It was kind of a fleeting feeling. Although it was powerful, I could feel that my conditioning pulled me back again.
What shifted in your life, if anything?
Yes, I gave myself permission to not follow any rules or regulations. My attitude was, and this was kind of my learning from my epiphany, is not to be attached to any of it. And I know it's kind of a trendy word at the moment, non-attachment. But it really was like, well, I don't know if I want to be an acupuncturist in a year's time or 10 years' time. I don't know who I'm going to be next week. I mean, it really was that idea that this knowledge that we cling to and the labels don't serve me. And I still do it. I build more labels, and then I suddenly wake up and I go, no, I don't want this. Now it does sound incredibly selfish, I think, and because it's not playing by the rules. Because the rules are that we all run together as a pack, and we're there to support each other and to compete with each other and to live with each other, and I think my lesson from the epiphany is I don't like that. I'm not interested in that. It doesn't get anywhere close to the experience that I've had and that I believe to be reality.
But you came back and you returned to acupuncture. I mean, do you feel it was calling you back, and indeed that has been part of your calling in life?
Yes, I missed it. The reason I missed it is because I realized that when I was working with patients, the place that I inhabited as the practitioner was the part of me that felt most real.
Why do you think people struggle so much with change?
Because I think they believe they're supposed to be in control of their own life. I think they've been told that you can do whatever you want. You've got to work out what it is you want, and you've got to do X, Y, and Z to achieve that. And so the mind has been given this responsibility that it doesn't really want. The mind is there to compute the experience and to create a feedback loop that helps us with the natural process of change. So the truth is, none of us know what's going to happen. Some people do live their whole lives under the illusion that they are in control of it because they reduce it, they make it much, much smaller. So of course, if you condense something and you hold it really tight, of course, not much is going to change within that. But you're missing out. Yes. Well, suffocation. I mean, yeah, absolutely. It's, that's the kind of free will bit. You can choose to say, right, this is the way I want my life to be, and I don't want any other influence. And if someone like me comes along who's really annoying, challenging, I don't want it. There are some people that come to me and I can tell they don't like me challenging them because I'm challenging the construct.
So if you give one piece of advice to anybody who feels shackled for whatever reason and feels they want to bring about change, but they're like literally stuck. I know this is very unfair to ask, but what would that one thing be that you would say to them?
I would say take a risk. It doesn't have to be a big risk, but step outside of the box and take a risk. I mean, and it's not prescriptive, but something that feels like a risk. There's got to be a little bit of fear around it, because when we break the mold, that's kind of scary when we've been investing in it for a long time. So don't be destructive, don't be unkind, but take a risk.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Double Espresso with D, with me, D Sterling. If you enjoyed it, I'd love you to review and subscribe to the podcast so we can share these amazing stories with others. I'd also love to connect with you, so feel free to contact me via Instagram DM at D Double Espresso. Until the next time, au revoir.